on the eve of a gotta have it game with the Maryland Terrapins. We're not talking X's and O's, well, a little bit. We're not talking culture. We're not talking fourth phase. We're talking numbers. We're getting into the nitty gritty with it with our guest, Gard Your Fickell on Talkin Badgers. It is Talkin Badgers, powered by BadgerNotes.com. I am your host, Kedrick Stumbris. You can find me and the show on the website formerly known as Twitter at Talkin Badgers, me at Kedrick Stumbris. Find the podcast, youtube.com/@Talkin Badgers. Today, we are talking, you probably already heard from us once today. If you haven't, go back one show in your feed. We had our instant reaction show. I went live on Thursday afternoon. I don't know what everyone else is doing on Thursday afternoons around 4 p.m. But I personally was talking about the Wisconsin Badgers basketball schedule. And I got some takes on playing 5 games on the road in 3 weeks in February. Feels like a lot. Feels like a lot to me. Scroll back in your feed. Go find that one if you're fiending for some hoops as I was. But today we are rounding out our preview of the Maryland Terrapins as they come to town tomorrow morning against the Wisconsin Badgers inside Camp Randall Stadium at 11 a.m. We're bringing in analytics extraordinaire Gard Your Fickell to break that match up down. Inspired by a little bit of a conversation he and I got into it on the internets after the Alabama game. So without further ado, we're going to bring in Gard Your Fickell coming up next on Talkin Badgers. We bring into the show Gard Your Fickell, Wisconsin Badgers football, basketball analytics extraordinaire. My man, how you doing? Good. We have not gotten the opportunity to do this live before, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. Happy to be on. Thank you for the extraordinaire. I'm not sure I would go that far, but we'll see. Yeah,
it rolls off the tongue after analytics. So worst case scenario, you can just blame linguistics on it if you feel like you can't live up to it.
I like
that. Before we get into the Maryland, Wisconsin of it all, I don't know if you got a chance to peek your eyes at the Big Ten men's basketball schedule as it came out earlier today. Do you have any initial thoughts? Did you get eyeballs on it?
I did get eyeballs on it. Skimmed it a little bit. Obviously, closing the year off at Purdue, not an ideal situation. So we'll see if we're gliding into that matchup or if we're falling into that matchup. But I think there's some favorable gets from the home and away splits. I'm not sure when Illinois is ever going to make it back to the Kohl Center. I saw that was an away. I'm not sure what the Big Ten's beef is with Wisconsin from a scheduling standpoint with that. But I think it's a strong group this year. I'm excited for that to unfold.
I am fascinated by the fact that they played Illinois home and away last year.
Did they? Okay.
I am fascinated, likewise for you, because this was also, I think they did Purdue first, and obviously it stuck out like a sore thumb. It's like, oh, well, you're gonna play Purdue at home in Mackey on senior night. Cool. They had to play on Zach Edey's senior night inside Mackey 2 years ago, and now they go back to West Lafayette for Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren, and Braden Smith's senior night. Like, all these long, stalwart Purdue guys finish off their careers at home against Wisconsin. It's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah, it's bad juju.
For sure. But hoops is a little over a month and a half, a little under a month and a half away. So let's focus on football for a little bit here. I wanted to have this conversation as a nexus off of an interaction you and I had on the internet early in the week post Alabama, because it's always great when you can get to the internet, see somebody else who you think is smart. They disagree with you. They have a different look on things, and makes you think, maybe I need to reconsider. It's really great when you see someone smart who shares an opinion that is the same as yours, which is what happened to me. And I think you and I took a little bit of a different look at the Wisconsin football offense coming out of the game against Alabama. And I'm wondering, based on what we saw in that game, where you think the signs for positivity on the offensive side of the ball might be for the Badgers.
Yeah, I think the explosive plays are we're right on the precipice of making them a little bit more consistently.
Mm.
That will generate a lot of the kind of pro analytics metrics for us. So that's kind of the chunk plays that get you inside the opponent's 40 is really what they call echo rate, or it's more commonly referred to now as just kind of a positive drive rate. And so basically that gets you in a position to score some points, whether it's a field goal, whether it's getting into the end zone. And I think we just haven't connected on a lot of the opportunities that we've seen come to play. I'm thinking of a couple of the deep shots that Billy Edwards took early in the Miami, Ohio game. Obviously, the Vinny Anthony deep shot last week against Alabama are the ones that kind of are top of mind for me right now. In those, like, obviously, Danny O'Neill kind of spoke to it in the presser that he had on Tuesday or whatever it was, that he was just kind of late to it, didn't trust kind of the scheme that Grimes kind of put into the game plan this week, that was actually going to pay off. So he's a little late on the trigger there. Didn't necessarily have the arm strength of Billy Edwards to kind of counterbalance the lateness of his throw, but it's there, right? It's schemed up, and Grimes has kind of been able to kind of maneuver the chess pieces on the board and get our guys open. And that's something that I don't know if we necessarily had a lot of under the Phil Longo experience. That was, specific to, hey, we see this, we're gonna be able to challenge it and execute on it. We obviously haven't executed very great. I think kind of was looking at the total explosive play, what our adjusted rankings are. We're 70th right now in total explosive rate adjusted. So it's not great, but kind of speaking to there's not a lot of rush explosiveness to be seen right now. So we're leaning pretty heavily on the pass game, and pretty close, not quite there.
Yeah, I the flip side of that to me is their, echo rate allowed against Alabama was pretty tremendously bad. I mean, just plays of 15 plus yards only through the air, 9 of them for 274 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, you're more the numbers guy than me, but that feels like a big number.
Yes.
Which to me, I mean, is there reason to be concerned against a quarterback in Malik Washington who's shown, opponent aside, we'll get to that later on, an ability to huck the ball down the field at least a little bit? Are you concerned about the defense's ability to contain some of these explosives?
Yes. Just given the fact that the pass rush, I think a lot of people think it's good given what it's done against Miami of Ohio and Middle Tennessee State, but it really didn't show up against Alabama. Now you're talking about two sides of the spectrum, like the extremes of the spectrum, shall we say. So I think this game will really tell us a lot about where this team's at. And that seems like a very, very kind of beaten down narrative so far. But I mean, we really haven't seen them play kind of a middle of the road team. And I think that's where both of us right now are kind of at, given kind of the metrics. And so I think this will show if we have signs of life, or if this is going to be a continuation of the struggle of 2024.
No, I think that's
to your question on the Malik Washington, I guess, like, I don't have a lot of faith in the back end. So if the pass rush isn't there, I've got a lot of concerns.
Yeah, to your point about learning a lot against Maryland, right? And you're right. This has been beaten to death, but I don't know that I've explained it very well in the show. And so I want to give like my explanation for why I think that's true. And I welcome you to do the same after the fact. Miami is something of a, like, at best case, seems to be something of a middling group of 5 team, right? Maybe like an upper tier team in the MAC for sure, but the MAC isn't what the MAC was, give it 5 years ago. Middle Tennessee is the absolute dregs of the FBS and would be a double-digit underdog to several teams in the FCS. So that's like the bottom. And then you played the absolute top in Alabama. So to me, you haven't played, if you're Wisconsin, anything near what should be comparable competition. So it's hard to tell where do they have plus value on the roster through coaching, through scheme. Where does that plus value come from? Because in so many cases of it, they've been either completely outmatched or they've been completely outmatching opponents. So it's hard to just adjust your expectations based on what we've seen through three weeks. I don't know if that makes sense to you or if you see it differently and why we think Maryland is kind of the first instance we're going to see really what this team is.
Yeah, no, that's the exact thought process that I have. Kind of spot on.
All right. Well, again, glad to hear from someone else I think is smart that I'm not totally crazy. That's always helpful. So you have a bit of a mind for explosives, seeming to be right on the precipice. And I know that you looked at Jeff Grimes over this offseason and thought of him as kind of the game theory king in terms of his offensive scheme, kind of pulling the right levers at the right times, pushing the right buttons. And I have praised him a lot for going to the play off the play in a lot of instances. And I wonder, is that kind of how you're assessing just how it is they're scheming up these near explosives, or is it something else?
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of exactly how I'm thinking of it. I mean, given just that Vinny Anthony play that we didn't connect on, right? But it's kind of how O'Neill spoke to it, is we were going to be running those hitch routes. We knew that over time they were going to start to kind of collapse on those, try to condense the box, and we were going to make that double move shot, right? So I think that, to me, that speaks a lot to Grimes, the explosive with Kekahuna and Vinny Anthony in the rush game in Middle Tennessee. Like, those are both plays off a play, right? We've got, the kind of that wide zone action or the sprint option, boom, and then we're going to hit you on the backside if you start to overcommit. I think those all speak to kind of Grimes and kind of scheming up the ways of, I'm going to, kind of lose the hand early in the game to set up, that winning hand later in the game. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to show in a little bit of a different way in kind of that piece I did in the off season, where I kind of looked at, rush rate over expectation. What's kind of surprising is that we haven't ran the ball very well, but our rush rate over expectation is a little bit more towards kind of a Christian-esque, we're kind of rushing more than you would expect, given kind of all of the factors that kind of go into that regression model. And Grimes is more so been a guy who leans into the strength of his offense. So in his BYU days, he was very pass heavy, obviously, had Zach Wilson and some really great quarterbacks to kind of be within that system. You shift to more of his Baylor and Kansas years, he was pretty run heavy with, Jalen Daniels and being able to do a lot with kind of his personnel. So the fact that we're running the ball so poorly, and we're still running it a little bit heavy. I know a lot of people have been, kind of harping to run the ball a little bit more, try to develop some continuity with that group. But I think, the fact maybe that we're not able to rush at any sort of competent level thus far has maybe hampered a little bit of how all the pieces of his kind of puzzle fit together.
Well, part of this is kind of the conversation between, is it the run game overall? Because overall they've ran the ball well, like raw numbers wise, it's been like okay. It's been between the tackles that's the issue, in the traditional run games, so to speak, as opposed to the Grimesian run game, for lack of a better term. And I think where do you see the importance of distinguishing just that up the gut. Let's run the ball in this scheme on these wide zone plays versus can they get by with jet sweeps and the underneath stuff.
Yeah, I think you saw the importance of being able to establish the wide zone with how Alabama was able to defend the misdirection end arounds. I mean, 18 was able to just trigger hard because he didn't really need to respect the front side action as well. And so if we're not able to consistently be able to do that, like the Iowas of the world, the Ohio States, the Oregon's, Illinois, Indiana's, like those guys. I mean, for however we want to, think that we're a cut above of some of those teams from a personnel standpoint. I'm talking to the Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, not Ohio State, Oregon, but they're going to be able to kind of rely on their front seven to a level that Middle Tennessee and Miami of Ohio can't. And so we're going to have to be able to kind of put some pressure on that to generate a lot of the plays off the plays that he likes.
So changing gears a little bit into more big picture about this week upcoming against Maryland. You have your model, which projects this as Wisconsin winning this game with a score of roughly 18.4 to 12.1. I did some personal rounding there to make that easier to get off the tongue. But tell me, tell the viewers, tell the listeners just a little bit of what it is your model does without giving away the secret sauce all too much, but what it is your model does that spits out a score like that, which gives Wisconsin roughly a six-ish point victory in this game.
Yeah, so there's basically everything that's listed from a metric standpoint is an input into the model. And essentially it's looking at kind of all of those metrics on a full game basis. And then it's, using kind of a machine learning algorithm to kind of look at, okay, based on these levels of metrics, what is the points that you're expected to score based on kind of all the confluence of those offensive metrics. So the model is really kind of taking at kind of how does it build up the prediction based off of all of the past history, is really looking at kind of those opponent adjusted metrics. So for instance, right, the Badgers play Miami, Ohio, Middle Tennessee State. We're getting a huge opponent adjustment based on the level of competition that they play on a game in, game out basis in their respective conferences. So it's not saying, hey, if Middle Tennessee State plays well against, some other opponent in their conference, it's not giving that any of the same level of competition as, if Wisconsin played Ohio State and generated the same metrics. It's going to downgrade Middle Tennessee State significantly, and it's going to boost Wisconsin. So that's kind of the quick way to kind of go about how it kind of gets built up. It also is trying to see what factors the defense influences the offense's ability. So Wisconsin's metrics that are shown here is weighted, to a certain extent of how Maryland's defense is going to influence and vice versa. So that's kind of the high level overview of how it's kind of getting built up. But yeah, it's kind of, I always used to kind of harp on, models that spit out these kind of crazy, 18.37 versus 12.12. Like it's probably a 20 to 13 game, right? If you wanted to kind of just round it off to one of those. And that's kind of what the Vegas line opened at. But we've seen a pretty dramatic shift towards Wisconsin since the opening line came out. And I'm not really sure how to feel about that. If it's, some level of reversion to the mean from the Alabama that people are expecting, and the fact that Maryland really hasn't played anybody of note. But yeah, I think there's a pretty strong sense that Maryland's explosiveness and ability to generate a lot of points is pretty highly inflated based on the level of competition that they played. Wisconsin's run defense is legit. Now we have some conversations around, did Alabama even press that at all? So they're getting a pretty significant boost for that from their adjusted rush defense, and that's kind of really hampering Maryland's offense in the prediction model. But I see this as pretty cut and dry. 2013, that makes a lot of sense to me, given our offense hasn't been that great, but I think our defense is a lot better than what it showed at Alabama.
That feels like directionally correct to me. And I also kind of think it's interesting seeing, like, there are some power ranking systems in which this movement for the Vegas line, which you mentioned, like, the movement has been away from the direction of where some of these publicly available power ranking systems have had it, or at least like moved in that direction and then just continued to move that way up until making Wisconsin nearly a double digit favorite in this game, which, like you mentioned, maybe reversion to the mean. That's about where Wisconsin started the season. If you looked at some of the power ranking numbers that, particularly I take a pretty deep dive look at SP Plus when it's available. So it's fascinating to see everything kind of level back off to where things were near the beginning of the year before opening kickoff on Saturday. I don't know.
Yeah.
So when you are adjusting for opponent, because if you just read Maryland's game notes that they make available for this game, they make Malik Washington sound like the second coming. It's 773 passing yards, the first power conference true freshman to do this since 2018, and making these comps to Malik Washington's doing these things that nobody since Trevor Lawrence has done, and there's only been 2 Big Ten quarterbacks who've done this since 1996, and the other one's Christian Hackenberg and XYZ. How should folks adjust their expectations based on just the raw numbers and what they've maybe seen from Maryland and the offense so far against the level of competition they have done it against so far this year?
Yeah, I think they need to take a fairly decent haircut to what they should expect out of this quarterback, given the competition that he's played. It hasn't been very good at all, and my numbers kind of reflect that pretty strongly.
Yeah, they really do. They really do. Now, I was shocked at how much they did.
Yeah, and part of that is also Wisconsin's defense's influence on those numbers as well. So they're kind of they're getting brought back down to earth in terms of, hey, you're not going to be able to put up these types of numbers against kind of an average opponent, is kind of how the opponent adjustment metrics kind of work, I guess, for lack of a better term. Is it you're trying to normalize against what should you expect kind of versus the average of the data set, if that makes sense. So it's trying to normalize it significantly. So they're getting hurt there. But I'm also saying, hey, what is Wisconsin's influence going to be over kind of those specific metrics based on how they've performed versus their kind of sample set of teams that they've played so far this year. So kind of the combination of, hey, like Malik Washington put up great numbers. I don't think you can dispute that. Obviously, very highly touted coming out of high school, and he's kind of put it on tape. But he's put it on tape against lower level competition he's probably more used to have been playing. Now coming into Camp Randall, playing against I would say a very above pedestrian defense. We'll see how they get to the quarterback, but he's not going to be able to rely on a run game to kind of get him into more manageable situations. And we'll see how he reacts to that and sees more adversity.
Yeah, I found it fascinating that the model and the numbers that you published have their expected points added per pass play at a negative number, at a slightly negative number, despite the fact that Maryland has basically won despite like abandoning the run through 3 weeks so far this year. I don't know what you make of that. I don't know if that was a surprise to you when you ran the numbers this past week.
Yeah, I was a little surprised coming out of the Alabama game that we didn't get docked too much from an adjusted pass defense EPA per play.
Hmm.
So I mean the metrics are pretty high on Alabama's ability to throw the football. Now a little bit of that is, I mean, he went 17 for 17 against Louisiana Monroe, right? But I mean that's extremely efficient football, regardless of who you're playing. So they were able to throw the ball when he wasn't pressured as much versus Florida State. He was able to do some things. So there's kind of some ways that I'm looking at the data that kind of strips out sacks and things of that nature from passing stats and dropbacks. So, I mean, Alabama is as legit of a passing offense as you can see in the country right now, with all of the threats that they have from at the wide receiver position, plus their offensive line. While they weren't able to get a lot of forward push to run the ball against us, they were as stout as I've seen at kind of stunting, Riger and Cheeks, and not allowing a lot of pressure at all. So, yeah, we didn't get docked too much. And I mean, the pass defense was actually really good against Miami of Ohio. Gave up a couple of explosives versus Middle Tennessee, but that's about it. And when you're talking over, 40, 50, pass attempts, those are kind of taking a little bit more of the weight in the system. And we're other than the kind of the really disastrous plays against Alabama, pretty good on pass defense so far.
I like this tact toward the positivity on the secondary, because in the last 2 days we've had, and I drive the conversation on the show, right? So it's not, I'm not absolving myself from this take. But we've had a lot of people the last couple of days talk far more skeptically about the secondary. So I'm encouraged by our ability, at least, to bring on differing opinions. If not encouraged by maybe better play on the field than I thought would be available. One final kind of question about the Maryland game itself. If there's anything in particular that you think people should be watching for on Saturday to give something of maybe an early cue about how things might go, what do you think that thing is?
I think third down efficiency for Maryland's going to be a big key. They're not very good, even against low level competition thus far, at being able to keep the chains moving when they get to third downs, right? So they've been pretty good about not getting themselves into those situations, but once they've gotten there, they've kind of collapsed a little bit. And we've been actually pretty good on third downs thus far throughout the season. So kind of if we start to see them move the chains in some, third and not so manageable situations, that's not a good sign for us, because I think that tells us, the defense, the secondary, who's going to be put in those more pressure situations, and they're not able to hold up as much. That's going to be a lot more to kind of the people that you've had on and are not so high on that group. That's going to be a pretty telltale sign. So that's probably one of the things I'm going to be watching, is if our defense can continue to stay stout in the run, if we get off the field, or if we don't.
Sounds fair enough. Do you believe in the numbers? Do you believe this is a roughly touchdown win for the Badgers?
I think if we play Danny O'Neal all 4 quarters, I think that's for sure somewhere and around the ballpark that we're going to be at. If Billy gets the nod, I think there's a lot more opportunity from a down the field passing attack that can start to open up the rush game. And I think we can see a little bit more of the second half of Middle Tennessee State. I mean, not to that level, but some more signs of consistent competence that could, I think, push our offensive out to an outperformance level. I think the defense is probably where it needs to be right now.
That sounds about right to me. And if Billy gets the nod, that's seemingly more likely by the passing hour. So that would be something. That would be something for a fan base that is just gets horrific flashbacks anytime you talk about an intro quarterback the last couple of weeks. Okay, I have a non on the field question for you. So you have been Gard Your to some capacity since Paul Christ arrived, right? Am I correct in here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because you were Gard Your Christ, and I
Yep.
remember I reading your stuff back in those days, and you were Gard Your Leonard for a hot second until you were Gard Your Fickell. Otzelberger your Eck doesn't really fit the mantra here very, very well. What happens, God forbid, Greg Gard gets hit by a bus tomorrow?
I don't know. Oh man, we may have to just shut it down. But I've been joking, like, ever since I've started this. Although basketball has started to see some success as kind of the Kirk Penny guard transformation of the offense has really started to take flight. A lot of what they were trying to implement started in 2022, so we're seeing the fruits of that come to bear now. In kind of from the Badgers offense, from a basketball standpoint. But yeah, it's been some dark days, and sometimes I wonder if I just need to shut this down and go back under a rock and stop posting any of this analytics stuff, and maybe we'll start to see some more success.
It was hairy there for a minute for the Gard Your something or other. If that's the verbiage. I do think, like, if Greg Gard were to step aside and the program said, well, we believe in this lineage here, we can throw Joe Krabbenhoft into the fold. Like, there's something with Crab, right? There's at least something there I think you could grab
Yeah,
onto.
there's definitely something with Krabbenhoft for sure.
Okay, that is Gard Your Fickell, barring staff changes for the time being. Thanks so much for coming on the program, man. I really appreciate you. We'll link to you in the show description. Anything else people should know about you, where to find you, anywhere you talk about the Badgers on these here internets?
Yeah, no, just follow on X. That's pretty much where I post everything now, and usually it's confined to game days, or I'll post kind of the preview models for football. I also do it for basketball as well, so you'll see that as that starts cooking as well.
All right, we'll get to go, and appreciate you, man. Thank you once again to Gard Your Fickell for joining the show. Really tremendous dude, and I'm really glad he came on. I'm really excited to have him back in the future. Let's talk numbers about the Wisconsin Badgers football and basketball teams. We'll be back tomorrow reacting to the Wisconsin Badgers game against the Maryland Terrapins. Oh, yeah. Feels like you got to have a game if you are Wisconsin Badgers head coach Luke Fickell. Sure feels like you got to have a game for him. Until we are back after that game for a reaction show tomorrow on Wisconsin.